Hi everyone, and welcome back to Dev Show. My name is Sherry Liz, and I'm your host today, together with a good colleague of mine, Rasmus Jack, for this 24th episode of Dev Show. Hi Rasmus, how are you doing today?
Hi, Sherry. Still good. So keeping up the homeschooling and work from home. Staying in isolation here in Denmark. Amazing. What about yourself?
Yeah, sounds pretty amazing, and I see that we are matchy today.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Rudy, so I
The
bet you,
postman was here.
yeah, I bet you got it from a good colleague. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Sherry, thanks.
Ah, great. So, what do we have on the agenda today, Osmus?
Yeah. So today we have, as always, an interesting topic. So you've probably seen the title, which is the fifth element. So Azure Secure DevOps, and I just asked the speaker just before this that what in bullet points what are we gonna learn today? So basically, overall, I won't go into much details, but we will learn how to deploy to Azure in a secure way using a range of tools. And it's not just the deployment; it's also afterwards in terms of how do you monitor, etc. So that's what we can expect from the session today. I'm looking very much forward to it. So, but before we introduce the speaker, is there anything we should share with the audience here?
So as always, we really encourage you all to ask your question also from the speaker, because the speaker is here to teach you, and it can be totally a nice two-way conversation. And I'm pretty sure that the speakers are also appreciating this interaction. But I want to remind you all that we have a code of conduct, and we are enforcing our code of conduct. Thank you, Rasmus, for highlighting the URL. It is on our main meetup page, but it's actually very simple. We just want you to be kind and mindful of others. So I guess this is the time to bring our
Yeah,
speaker. Or I
yeah.
forgot.
Let's welcome in Mike.
Hello.
Welcome to the Dev Show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm
How
excited.
are you doing? How are you doing?
Pretty well, seeing this little thing going on in the world and being Belgium and still in a lockdown. And yeah, casual.
Yeah, yeah. Same all around Europe.
Yeah, I think everybody's in the same boat. So, but yeah, I'm doing okay. I mean, the sun is shining, kind of. We're happy.
Okay, we don't have the sunshine, but we try to be happy. So
You're always happy, Sherry. Come on.
we know that you work at Microsoft. Can you tell our audience that what actually you're doing at Microsoft?
So I'm what they call a cloud solution architect. And in the beginning, when I started with Microsoft, I was a technical evangelist, one of the last to be known like that. And I still secretly keep that title just to enforce myself a little bit more interesting. No, I kind of like that title, but no, but I have an actually very interesting job as a cloud solution architect. I get to meet all levels in partner organizations and talk to them about their solutions that they're building. We do the build with. I'm in the OCP part. I'm in the one commercial partner part and not in the customer part. So I only work with partners and we build their own solutions. Mm-hmm. So that could be either ISV, so independent software vendors with interesting names like Visma or whatever you have. Do you have a lot of partners there that are actually building solutions that they want to offer like a SaaS, they want to be the next Spotify, shut up, take my money, I want to use your service, that kind of thing. And I work with them to make sure that they get to the best architecture and the best design for their solution on our platform. And that could be with Azure, hopefully, but that could also be that we guide them into Dynamics 365 or even M365 with Teams, for instance, or a combination of all. So yeah, typically that's my day-to-day job.
Sounds exciting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't feel hurt, but I'm actually a cloud solution architect, and I actually say that I'm a cloud solution architect.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's the way you fill it up, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Mike, you've been in the IT industry for more than 20 years. We actually, you counted before this that it was actually almost 24 years. So can you just show, yeah, you're not old, no. So can you share with us just what you have done in the past, just to highlight what?
I started out as a VB developer, a VB enterprise developer. So I did Com Plus, DTS, DCOM, all these things. A lot of fun. I started off with VB5, and then I worked my way up to VB6. And before I know it, I was into the .NET world. And then in the meantime, I also grabbed some system engineering and some real system management on top of that. So I did a dual role. Then after that, I rolled into team leading and got to coach people and got to mentor people. I still do that, by the way, university grad students who need to get their next challenge, like getting a job and stuff like that. I actually offer my services to everybody. Even the company, I do a lot of mentoring to new people that are on board or just want to flow into their roles. It's a lot of fun to do. So yeah, I've done a lot actually. I even did SharePoint at some time, but we're not going to mention that. Yeah, but I mean, I've run through every little segment of IT. I think the only thing that I've never done was project management, and thank God for that. I never did, because I'm really bad with maintaining project life milestones. I'm more of a deep people person and technical person than doing something like that. So yeah, but very wide. And then the summum of my career was actually when I became a Microsoft MVP, which I was for 6 years. So yeah, that's also something that I had next to that.
Amazing.
Yes, that's
6 years.
Amazing. So maybe do you have any tips for the audience how actually you could do that? I assume you did a lot of work for the community. Is that true?
Yeah. And I still try to. I mean, I still run a user group in Belgium with a couple of friends of mine. It's called the Azure. So that's azug.be. We actually have a session on Thursday with an MVP on Azure penetration testing. Pretty cool stuff. You should invite him too. He's a pretty cool guy if you want him. I'll pass him the credentials. And yeah, I do a lot of, as I said, mentoring. I try to be as active as possible on Twitter. GitHub contributions. Yeah, speaking at conferences. Hopefully one day again in real life. Please, yeah, I want to meet all my friends again, and yeah, and doing stuff like this. I mean, this is basically the fun part of my professional life. Let's call it that way. I see it as it's the fun part. I mean, I love this thing so much that I don't see it as a profession. I rather see it like a hobby than a profession. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's great. So we have one more question, and you most likely know what it is, because you shared a fun fact about yourself. You shared that you are a Batman lover, and we need to ask you, what does it take to be a Batman lover? And I know you have gadgets. I know you have things with Batman.
Oh yeah,
all the time as well. Let's see something. Yeah. Let's hear something.
And it wouldn't be hosted by Danish people if I wouldn't show these, like Legos. Lego for the win. I have plenty of those. I mean, I have all the larger sets, and my kids still play with those. I have the latest Batmobile and the latest Batwing version, so the large adult set. I even have gotta really come up close. I have a small symbol always with me. I always carry this with me. I got this for my 20th birthday from my wife, so I'll know her that long already. So yeah, it's all these things, and I have a collection ranging from my main interest points are the 1966 version of Batman, so the Burt Ward, and the Adam West version, so with the Batutsi and the Batmobile, like the Ford Futura, and the 1989 Batman series, so the Michael Keaton series, because they are from a stance of dark humor and all these things. They're pretty cool movies. They're a little bit outdated now, or backdated now, but yeah, they're pretty cool. But I have a lot of material, I can tell you that. Comics, action figurines, badges, buttons, food, Kellogg's cornflakes. You cannot imagine it, but I found it somewhere, and yeah, I probably have it.
Amazing. That's amazing. Love the passion.
You're an approved Batman lover with all of the things I do.
Yeah, but the real Batman lover is on. He knows the universe, and he knows the all the things that come along with it, and all the side stories, and that's a little bit where it ends up doing. You have a passion for it. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Great. So before we pass the stage to you, I just wanted to again tell the audience that if you have any question for Mike, please type it in the chat. And also during the talk, we are going to highlight the link to claim your Azure Heroes Badger, and also the feedback form. And one of you that pass us the feedback will also get some prize from our side. So we want.
Ooh, nice.
And we're going to talk about it after Mike's talk.
Okay.
Take it away, Mike. We look forward to hear your session.
Okay, cool. So first I'm gonna need to start with a little bit of an introduction, and really thanks again for having me. I'm already having a blast. So the reason why I call this talk The Fifth Element is for those who've seen the Luc Besson movie. It's a classic. You should watch it. Even if you don't like sci-fi, it's just a fun movie to watch because there's a lot of humor in there, a lot of things happening in there. But one of the things that I refer to in this part is actually at a certain point in time. In that movie, there's a scene where the priest actually talks about how the Mondoshuan, so that's the race, they own something that can protect life, and he mentions this as the following: in their possession are the 4 elements of life, like earth, water, wind, and fire. And these elements, when they are gathered around a 5th, the supreme being, the ultimate warrior created to protect life, will then be, and so on and so on. So what he actually is saying is there's 4 elements that are constructing life, and there's a 5th element, an ultimate being, the supreme being, the perfect element that can actually protect life. And this is a little bit the analogy that I try to put here. You have the 4 aspects of development, and you need to add a 5th one called security. And this is what this talk is really about. We're going to talk about how you as a developer, and it's not only as a matter of, I need to deploy my application into Azure, and the IT ops guys, they need to secure it, and they need to provide whatever, like web application firewalls and so on and so on. There's a lot more that needs to happen, and I'm going to talk to you about the story about Shift Left. I'm going to talk to you about the security development lifecycle. I'm going to talk to you about how you can apply in each of the phases, in all the 4 elements of your, and you will see in a second what those 4 elements are, what you need to apply to make your Azure deployments and your Azure development more secure, and actually put that into a DevOps way. And I'm going to show you tools, I'm going to show you tips, I'm going to show you free tools, I'm going to show you some paying tools that are worth it. But a lot of these things you can just use, but you also need to make sure that you understand what you're doing. It's not only about just implementing the tools, you also need to work about it. So let's dive right in, because we don't have that much time. And I have a lot of ground to cover because there's a lot of things to cover. But don't worry, I will share the slides afterwards. And each of the slides has a QR code that you can scan if you want to read more about the elements. There's quick links in there, so you can immediately take a look at the documentation or the download pages and take a look at what is next to that. Okay. So, and if you have questions, feel free, shoot them in, and we'll handle them on our side. So, the 5th element, now you know where the title comes from, but let's dive in immediately. So if PowerPoint is willing to accept my click. Yeah. So we talk about the 4 elements, and the 4 elements are actually secure design, secure coding, secure building, and secure deployment. And the build and the deploy part are actually a little bit subdivisable, let us say, by means of secure scanning, secure depth, secure dependency management. All these things need to take place too. And on the deployment side, we also need to have the ops part, where we do monitoring, but also making sure that everything is being deployed in a secure way, how that is handled. So this is a little bit the part. So typically you would have design, code, build, and deploy, like from the application lifecycle management. But we now put the 5th element on top of that, called security. So if we continue, let's a little bit of an education on about the security development lifecycle. You know the application lifecycle. Yeah? The security development lifecycle starts a lot earlier, ends a lot later too than just the application lifecycle management. And it also comes down to, in the first place, get trained. As a developer, you should know what there is, what can happen when you do like not use the correct way of coding, or using weak references, or using packages that have like vulnerabilities in them. And you should be aware of those. I mean, you don't want to be, and sorry about for that SolarWind, but I'm going to mention you anyway. You don't want to be the next SolarWind. It can happen to anybody. And this is actually a very good example of why DevSecOps or SecDevOps, or wherever you want to put it, why security should be handled all over the place. It's not only about the making sure that your code is not vulnerable. It's also the way you handle your development street and your DevOps infrastructure. Yeah, and let's all agree, DevOps, it's a culture thing, but you also have DevOps tooling like Azure DevOps or GitHub, right? So you need to make, or Jenkins, or whatever you want to use from tooling. Doesn't matter. As long as you set it up securely and make sure that you also have monitoring and heuristics on those, and you actually check those. So the first part that you need to do is, tomorrow, I want you all to take a look at what security actually can do for a developer and have a little bit of training. Just 10, 15 minutes a day will make you a lot smarter, and it will really help you to have an insight in what's happening there. And if we then take a look at all the different steps in the security development lifecycle, where training is the first one, so you need to create awareness. And then we go into the what we call the design phase, where we do requirements gathering. How should our application be constructed? How should it be designed? And when we implement it, what do we need to do? Do we need to enable HTTPS 2, HTTP 2, all these things? Do we need to have strong weaknesses, API management in front of that, secure it that way? Those are all the things that come along with it also from an implementation part. But you also need to verify it. You need to test against it. See whether you did a good job by doing requirements and design gathering. And then you need to release. But also, very important is that you need to have an incident response system, that you know what you should do when something goes wrong, when your data gets breached, when your pipeline has been polluted, where whatever could happen. You need to have an incident response ready at that end. And even from a developer point of view, that's very important. You need to know some backup procedures. You need to know some restore procedures. You need to make sure that how you can safeguard your coding, and so on and so on and so on. It's very, very important that you know that. Yeah. That's the awareness part. And if you take a look a little bit deeper in the SDL, with some of the best practices, indeed provide some training. Provide training on how to do the best way of developing an API. The best way is to develop a web application, what you should and what you shouldn't do, like SQL injection, OWASP top 10 rules and stuff like that. For those who don't know what those is, there's a list of rules that you can apply to a web application that can be tested against. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things here. And some of these are cross-site scripting, SQL injection, all these things, and they can actually make your application very weak. So if you know already what the awareness is on those things, you actually are doing a good job. This entire process, putting that on the developer side and not on the operation side, is what we call shift left. So shift left is really a motion that you should be handling, and you as a developer should start doing from within your IDE, for instance, or from your command line when you create something like npm audit. Use Visual Studio with some tooling, which I'm going to demonstrate in a second. So there's a lot of things that you can do. Next to that, you should make sure that you have a good security requirements. There's tooling for those. And one of the most important things that you can do here is actually perform a threat model. And a threat model is actually creating something which allows you to trace how your data and your user flow is going, and what can go wrong from a risk mitigation part. Next to those things, some other things that are very important is like perform static analysis and dynamic analysis security testing. Very important. Static means you're going to do like code metrics and all these things and technical depth. Dynamic is actually penetration, a little bit like penetration testing, but in dev test and in an automated way. And then you also need in the end, of course, when everything is live, do penetration testing, make sure that everything is like segregated and secured from that point of view also, so that there's not a lot of things going on there. So yeah, enough on the theory. Let's dive into some of the more practical stuff. So secure design. Well, I'm first going to introduce you to an acronym, and that acronym is called STRIDE. Now, it's actually Microsoft that came up with that acronym, I think in the late 90s, where STRIDE stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. Those together create STRIDE. And what they actually do is they highlight how well somebody can do like a impersonation, whether your data is being disclosed, what the risks are, and all these things can go back to a pointing system, so a value system, and that value system can be valualized by DREAD. DREAD is another acronym which is in relationship to that. And giving this acronym, you can actually take into account the impact or the actual damage that you can do with it, the ease, how it can be reproducible, and so on and so on. So these two things, they actually bring up to that. Now, where does that come along with threat modeling? Well, if you take a look at threat modeling from a simple way, is you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. So the first thing that you need to ask yourself is, what are you building? That's the model. Then, what can possibly go wrong? We all know that. What could possibly go wrong? I know what I'm doing, right? So what can go wrong is actually the threat identification. And the threat identification is very important because they know what kind of weaknesses can be flowing into your application or into your solution. More important is what you're going to do about it, how you're going to mitigate. Yeah. And then the last step is, did you do an acceptable job at 1 to 3? And you're going to validate what you did. If not, then back to the drawing board, Robin, and you start off again. So now Microsoft can help you there. We have a tool called TMT, or the threat modeling tool. And the threat modeling tool is free. It already exists for a couple of years. The cool thing is that the last couple of years we've been actively developing on it again, and we have now something specifically for Azure with templates that can actually help you to design a better solution. You can do threat modeling before you start building your application. You can also do threat modeling afterwards and take a look at what the possible impact could be and where you can improve some of these things. So it's never too late to start, although if it's a larger solution, it can be like time consuming because you need to take a look at all the different aspects of your solution, but you need to keep that in mind that you can start anyway. And if you're building something new, like a new model or a new feature that is totally segregated from everything else, let's say that you're going to use functions or something, you can totally use this to make sure that you can build a safer way of implementing it, and that you can at least have an idea of what are the things that can go wrong. And this tool will actually help you to generate some of these things automatically. So just to demonstrate you. So I have TMT here open. So this is a model that I've opened. This is one that we actually put online for ourselves that you can find on our doc sites. And the cool thing about this is a PaaS web application. So we're using web apps. We're using APIs, and they're bound with HTTPS. You can see that there's an app service trust boundary here. There's a SQL database involved. There's a key vault involved, and all these elements, they come from the Azure template. So you can download this template. It will be updated. You can even contribute to it. It's on GitHub, so you can do a contribution on it. And the cool thing is if you have all these elements, you have all these properties that these elements have. Like, for instance, you have a browser. Is that browser isolated? Yes or no? You can set all these little settings, so read upon them. But more important is its connection between all these things. So here I have an HTTPS connection. And here you can see what kind of attributes this has and how the data is flowing, where it's flowing over HTTPS, where it's a REST payload, JSON payload, and so on and so on and so on. Now, if you set all these properties right, and if you set all your connections and all your little services that you're going to use right, Then the most important part comes. It's the generation of all the risks that can come out. And you can see there's nothing here on the screen, but the most important view comes up from the moment when you do this. You can go to view, and then you go into analysis view. And the analysis view, based on all the different connections that you have and all the different elements that you have, they have values behind those. And they can identify some of the possible problems that you can reach. Like, for instance, here, this thing. So between the Azure portal and then DevOps engineer, some potential process crash or stop for the Azure portal could happen. Yeah, that's a default thing in there. So that's not that interesting. But what would be more interesting is like this thing, the authentication flow, for instance. So I highlight this one. So let's see. This is, come on, go. We can take a look here. So we have here, well, let's take this elevation using impersonation. So that's an elevation of privilege. So this is where a stride comes in. And as you can see here, it's a connection from the API to the database. And here you can actually use an impersonation. So if somebody injects a user and they can find out the admin user or whatever, or they can inject through SQL a user here, they can actually start impersonating that user, and they can abuse it. And you can see here, the database may be able to impersonate the context of an API and order it off, and you can have the entire context here. Now, this can be then used as a checklist. You can export it as a CSV. You can even say it needs investigation. This one needs is already mitigated. So you just walk through that list, and it can generate a report. And this report then, if I do a full report here, so let me just go to the desktop where all important files are. Voila. This will open in my browser normally, all as well. There you go. On the other screen. Voila. This will open the report. It's an HTML file, and per diagram part, it will actually generate all the documentation. You can highlight several parts, or you can just do it step by step. So that way you can use it as a mitigation and a checklist for minimizing all your risks. So that's already a good start to do a really safe design. So I know a lot of people don't know this tool. If you're in security, you probably do. But at least you know something now, and you at least I hope you already learned something, because for me that's the most important part. So, and feel free, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. So let's go on to the next step. The next step is actually more on the secure coding part, and this is where the developers. This is our happy place. What we need to code, and what more do we love than Visual Studio Code, IntelliJ, whatever kind of IDE you're using, right? So from a secure coding perspective, we also can help you a lot. And I tell this to most of my partners where I work with. Have you been using those or those? And they probably never heard of those tools. So it's very important for me that I can actually talk about this. So one of the first things that you can actually do is use the key configuration package. It's a NuGet package that you can use to set up a secure way and immediately start implementing things like Key Vault to do key management and security and secrets management, and where you can actually don't have to worry about it in your code anymore, and the NuGet package will actually do that a little bit for you. So this is a very useful NuGet package that you can download. Take a look at how it works, and it's very easy to use it. You only need a couple of lines. You only need the reference to be set and done with, and then it works. Okay, I'm not going to demonstrate this one. I am going to show you, however, something what comes along with it. It is, you all know that you have credentials to databases, and we all, like I put my credentials in my web.config, or I use an app.config, or I hard code it. Don't do that. Please don't do that. But sometimes, for some reason, it happens. You forget something, you try something, you test something, you push into your Git repo, you push your web.config or an application.config, and you forget that you actually have a credential in there. It could be an API key, it could be a secret. And we at Microsoft, so if you're still using Visual Studio 2017, shouldn't be, better be upgrading to 2019, but there's probably still some people that do. Then there's a tool called the Continuous Delivery Tools for Visual Studio, which has a tool called CritScan. Now, for all the others, we can have CritScan if you're using GitHub, for instance. It is automatically being pushed in there. And we do crit scanning, and we scan your code on possible credentials that have leaked. Let me show you how that works. So I have an organization here. If I find my browser here we go. So let me go to my projects here. So I have here a project. You see the security tab here. Maybe make it a little bit bigger so that way everybody can read. Voila. So there's a security tab here. And now by default, this is for everyone. But if you have a paying subscription on GitHub, you have some additional stuff here, and you actually see that. You see this secret scanning alert. Now, I did a bad thing and actually injected a SQL connection string to the database on a server in Azure. And I have the user in here, and I have the password in here. Now, you can copy it because it's a non-existing database, so don't try it. If you think you want to be smart, go ahead, but it will not exist because it's not there. But the thing is that I just did a git push and I've totally forgot about it, and nobody did a review. Now, GitHub actually just scans my code and saw that there was actually a secret in there. And as you can see, there's also in the Swagger UI bundle, there's also a network use. It's also a fake one. Don't worry about it. It can be an API key. It could be an AAD token. It could be whatever. So it actually gets scanned, right? Now, if you're a Microsoft Premier customer, there's also a way to have this in Azure DevOps if you want to, and I will demonstrate that in a second where you can find that. So hopefully you learned something here too. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore in Visual Studio for now, but what you could do is just use GitHub, and even in the free ones and in the open source ones, it will actually show up there too, but you get a warning then instead of this thing. Okay, so pretty cool. Now, the most important part is please use a Roslyn analyzer to make sure that you're coding against secure coding practices. And one of the things that we can help you with is a Visual Studio extension existing for both Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code called SecIntelligence. Now, this thing is a Roslyn analyzer which gets injected and which analyzes your code, and it will actually start looking at issues that we know of when you're using weak references in code or when you're just using bad coding practices. Let me demonstrate you that quickly. So I have my Visual Studio here open, as you can see. So I have a couple of Azure samples here. And one of the things that I have here is a storage sample. I have a crypto sample, and this crypto sample is actually, it's using cryptography. And as you can see here, there's a lot of errors and warnings here, and they actually come back from the analyzer, and it points back to the best practices which you can find them to. So this is really, really bad what you did here. This can be really a weak reference, and it can actually break your code. But you can also have things like if you're doing like Azure Active Directory, and I know you had my dear friend Chris's last week here, you can actually see that there's also here things popping up, or should be popping up. Yeah, as you can see, the member of method is not transitive. It doesn't return listed groups, blah, 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 blah. So that's from security. So it even goes on code samples that you have. It looks at best practices and stuff. So this really can help you write cleaner and better code by just guiding you in, don't do this, but do that. Like for instance, this one, this one, for instance, if I go to this one, you see a web request. Please use HTTPS instead of HTTP. And that should be a standard. Actually, we should enforce that HTTPS on everything, right? We shouldn't do HTTP anymore. But at least you get the guidance here to how to do that. You can download this as an extension. You can find the link here. And you can find QR code here, couldn't find it. I can actually show you that also in Azure DevOps and Azure VS Code. So here it also is implemented. You will see it as a problem in this case. You will see that there's the chosen setting will allow public access of blobs within this container, blah, 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 blah. So you have all the access here and the best practices that come along with it. So this will actually also analyze your code from within VS Code. So you have a lot of good material here. Just to start using safe coding. Now, of course, if you're doing coding, you also have a repository. Make sure that also on the repositories you don't use full public access unless it's open source. It's a different thing. But make sure that you set the security in your repositories in a correct way. That you set only the contributors that need to have access to the code by means of identities, and typically, hopefully, they log in with multi-factor authentication, so that way nobody can just be injected in there, and that everybody needs to be authenticated against the directory. So you need to make sure that you also do these things. In GitHub, you can do that, and you can set all the permissions. Azure DevOps, the same. Use as much as you can organizational users coming from an Azure Active Directory. This will make your life, first of all, a lot easier. If they're gone, and they will not be able to access their resources anymore. Or at least you will see it that they've been logged in if they still have their resources for some reason. Yeah, but you never know if they forgot to delete them from Active Directory, of course, and then it wouldn't work. But if you have one identity all over the place, nobody will get the access anymore because the tokens will be revoked, right? So validate the users and make sure that you set that up correctly. Yeah. There's also a check here that you can do in Azure DevOps. There's a tool that you can use to validate where you set up everything securely. And this you can use with, and I'm going to show you. So I have a Visual Studio an Azure DevOps organization. And what I did here, I injected a tool called the AZDO security widget, which comes from the AZSK. I'm going to demonstrate it in a second. And this will actually validate through a build how you set up your entire Azure DevOps environment and whether you did it in a secure way, yes or no. So here you can see that the organization must be configured to authenticate users through using Azure Active Directory. That has passed, but do not enable access for external users in your organization, for instance. And there I failed. Why? Because I gave myself access to my own organization. Yeah, so these are the things. Make sure that visibility is being set up correctly. And there's also this thing where you can see where your agent pools are being set up correctly, where everything is being validated correctly, where there's security, where the security for the release is being set up correctly, and so on and so on, if you implemented those things correctly, of course. So this will actually help you to validate where your environment is being set up in a secure way. That brings us more to the SecOpsy way of doing things. So SecOps is more on where the static security analysis happens and the dynamic security analysis happens, and then we move into the deployment phase where we have our runtime and our protection, right? So let's try to take a look at what we can do from a secure build stance and a secure build point of view. So secure build is actually pretty easy. You have a plethora of tools that you can use to help you build securely, and depending on your language or your toolset that you're using for your development, that could be anything. Yeah? Some people just find it enough just to do an npm audit and just check for their packages, but there should be a little bit more. You should do code coverage, you should do technical depth checking, and so on and so on. So if we take a look at, for instance, in Azure DevOps, I give that as an example because that has the nicest visualization, but you can achieve kind of the same in GitHub Actions. Don't worry about those. There's a lot of integrations there too. There's a lot of tools that you can use for free. Like, for instance, there's the AZSK, which I'm going to discuss in a second. There's White Source Bolt, which is a free tool which can do dependency checks. There's Snyk in there. There's SonarQube that you can use either from a standalone point of view or Sonar Cloud, which you can use as a hosted model. which also comes for free. And there's all these different steps that you can integrate inside of your build pipelines. Now, today, a lot of people still are on Azure's DevOps pipelines. They work in both the classic, as in the YAML pipelines, so you can use them in both ways, and most of these tasks are available there. But also, again, in GitHub Actions, these things can be used from that point of view. So let's highlight a couple of those. One of them that I love to highlight is AZSK. Unfortunately, I saw an announcement last week that they're going to deprecate this, and this is a little bit sad because it is more than just doing scanning. What this does, it actually scans your ARM templates and your environment, whether it's your ARM templates that you're going to deploy or even your existing subscriptions. And what you can do here is, so you first need to go, you start up with a PowerShell module. One of the things that are in there is I need my sub ID, so I need my subscription ID first. I'm just going to highlight that. Voila. Don't worry about those, it's normal. And then I'm going to take a look what kind of PowerShell commands I have in my toolkit. So the AZSK, you can just download it as a PowerShell module. If I do a git command, I do module AZSK, you will see all the commands that are in there. So there's a lot in there. And one of the things that I'm going to use here is this one. So this is the AZSK ARM template security status, and there's the AZSK subscription security status. This will check against all the best practices that we have on a security level from deployment point of view, and we can check that before we deploy. So you can actually do this as a scan on your code to validate where that code, infrastructure as code, is a secure way. So let's first take a look at our template status. So I have a template here, so I'm just going to go with the Azure deploy here on this one. And if I run this, it will actually take a look on all the best practices. It will take a look at all the components that are in the JSON file, and it will generate me an Excel file or a CSV file with all the fields in there, as you can see here. I'm going to do the same for my subscription now. So I'm just going to quickly do this. I can have, here we go. So I'm going to get the subscription status, security status. So this will do a lot more because this will check every single aspect of my subscription. As you can see, it is running now against my subscription. And what this does, it actually checks whether I have things like minimize the number of admins. I only have a couple of them, but also make sure that all identities are granted admin. So it goes over a couple of checks that are being defined based upon the assets that you have inside of your subscription. And then in the end, you get a CSV file, and I already downloaded it earlier. It's the same result, and I already prettified it for you, which gives you a first of all, a control ID of what it is being activated, whether the status is passed or failed. So if we're only interested actually in the failed ones. You see what kind of a feature it is, whether the status is high, medium, or low. Is it based on a baseline control, and so on and so on. And here you can see ARM policies should be used to audit or deny certain activities in subscription that can impact security, for instance. So you need to apply some policies there to make it safer. Now, this is done specifically for demonstrating this. My Azure environment is a sandbox, so I explicitly do bad things there. Okay, so I also have some recommendations here, so you can do set ARM policies, you can set an SPL, and so on and so on. So this is really useful as a tool. There's going to be a replacement, so I've heard. So check out the resources that you have on this one. Okay. Next to that, you also have a best practices for writing ARM. There's the ARM TTK. It's also a set of PowerShell commands. I'm quickly going to demonstrate you this. I already have that here. And I can just do this template. This will validate everything, whether you're using still the correct APIs and whether you still. So this can actually clean up your ARM templates and prettify them and make sure that you have better outputs and better way of handling them. And that way your Azure DevOps or your GitHub actions will not get clogged up by the ARM actions. So next to that, we also have then the real scanning of your code. One of that I would like to highlight is white source bolt. So quickly going to go through another demo here. I already have a pipeline run here, as you can see. So I run a pipeline. It's this one. And in that pipeline, I have a successful build. And once I run that pipeline, that build pipeline, I actually get a white source build report. And what white source does is it's a free thing, the bold part at least, the normal white source is paying. It will check for vulnerabilities inside of packages, and you will get recommendations whether you need to update packages or where you need to replace them, and what kind of vulnerabilities are in there, and what kind of how high the vulnerability is, or whether it's a low maintenance vulnerability, and so on and so on. And you can even cross-validate with previous builds. Yeah, pretty cool. And then it also will look for bad licensing. But for open source, this is more important, so that way you don't get into a pickle when you're doing things wrong. So again, this is really cool, and as a free tool, and it works also on GitHub out of the box. One of my all-time favorite is Snyk. It's another one. This does a little bit more. Snyk can be integrated inside of your pipelines. It also can be integrated immediately on your GitHub repositories. But the cool thing about it is that it has a lot of good overview, and it even supports now infrastructure as code, and it will show you exploitable vulnerabilities, the packages that have gone wrong. There's a lot of integrations that you can set. A lot of these things come for free, and as you can see, they have a plethora of integrations with whether it's GitHub, Azure Repos, GitHub Server, Bitbucket if you want to. And you can even scan ACR, Docker hubs. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. So really check it out. But the most important thing is all these tools work on the same kind of database. It's just representation on how they bring things forward that will make it easier. And you can even use it in conjunction with pull requests and stuff like that. Now, security issues is not only real security issues, it's also technical debt. And one of the go-to tools for technical debt is actually SonarQube. And you have those in two flavors. You can set that up yourself. I run mine as a container inside of an Azure Web App. Pretty cool to do actually too. It's a lot of fun, and you get a lot of feedback on those things. So you can just download the container, or you can set it up from scratch if you want to on an Ubuntu or a Windows machine. It works on both platforms. Or you can use it as a service, and then it's called Sonar Cloud instead of SonarQube. And the cool thing about SonarQube is that if you take a look at the, and I need to open my browser again. Where is it? Here we are. That's what you get when you start switching. You have all these projects that you can set. And as you can see here, I have my same code here. I pushed in my pipeline, as you can see here. Let me just take a look at my summary and do an edit here. So that's the thing that I wanted to show. In my pipeline here, there's a build step that I have, which is referring to that SonarQube. So here you have it. So I first need to prepare the analysis, and then I need to do my build, and then I do a run code analysis and publish it. And once it is being pushed there, you will actually see the overall code health. You even can have security hotspots giving you high prioritized things. And this is really going to the code. And as you can see here, there's a password in here. So that's at risk. And you see that's an authentication thing. So it will come back a little bit to the secure intelligence, but then on a build level. So you can actually abuse this thing. And you can immediately integrate that with pull requests too, so that way you can fix those things. Even reviewing in there. Cool thing about it is that it also has a visualization in 3D where you want to see on security. I can take a look here on security issues, for instance, security remediation effort. You can actually get a good idea of what's going on, and then do a better calculation on where you need to be going, where you need to check. So I want to see all the issues. As you can see, this one really has a lot of issues. And if I then click on this large tweeting, you will actually see where the assets are, where it's located. So it actually helps you visualize it a little bit. All these things I'm showing here are just for free. A lot of fun to set up. It can be a little bit cumbersome, but really cool stuff. Now, I told you about the crit scan earlier on GitHub. If you're a Premier customer, you actually can get security code analysis as a package, and you can install that, and you can actually use it from there out. And then you can use it in Azure DevOps. And all these things come along with it. So if you take a look at this one, for instance, and if I just add a step, you will actually see that there's a lot of stuff in there. So if I just look at security, you will see that all these things with these green shields, they come with it. So there's security risk detection, there's security analysis reports, analysis logs, and so on and so on. You can even do the crit scan part. Where is it? Crit scan. You have it. We even have bin skim as a you can have a code analyzer, a Roslyn analyzer specifically if you want to. So there's a lot of things that come along with it. It will help you to check on all the different pieces of code. I have one prepared here. So if I do an edit on this pipeline, this doesn't work for GitHub, unfortunately. Maybe they will bring it one day. It's also an internal thing that was developed from Microsoft first, and then we came up with it. As you can see, I'm running all of these. And you have you can download the results as an artifact. So you can find them back in the artifacts. And if you then take a look at the artifacts that you have, it will give you back a security analysis report with all the results coming back from all the different tools. So you only have one reporting element to be handling. Okay, so I really need to hurry up. I only have a couple of more minutes because elsewhere I will be stealing Sherry's talking points. Quickly go over secure deployment. Grab onto some best practices. Use RBAC and use principals or managed identities for those things. Don't do it with a user or something like that. Always allow the principle of least privilege. Yeah, and make sure that you do that and keep that in mind. Try to be in a governor mode. Yeah? Use blueprints, policies, and even value that from a cost perspective also. Yeah? But blueprints and policies will actually help you also maintain a secure DevOps flow. Yeah? Once we are going inside of a deployment phase, as you can see, there's this thing. There's too much slides. Just quickly gonna. We also have the monitoring part, and from the monitoring perspective, one of the tools that can really help you, that is really useful, is Azure Security Center. And a lot of you are today using containers as a deployment vehicle. Yeah? Containers can be a very dangerous thing. They're leaky, and if you don't manage them in the correct way, or you use a wrong base image, or you create a base image wrongly, you can actually do more wrong than good. Now, luckily in Azure, you have Azure Defender, and you have the container scanning thing we did together with Qualys, and you can get there either through Defender or through the inventory. Let me quickly go through Defender here, and as you can see here, if I load Defender. Here we go. You can actually see that it immediately reacts to a container image scanning, which is unprotected. So if I click on this one, you will actually see that it will give me an image with all these issues immediately. So there's one image that has an app vulnerability. It's highlighting these vulnerabilities that you need to fix. We even give you sometimes some remediations that you can actually maintain, or even have remediations immediately inside of the security checks itself. And this will help you to harden your container image, or update your code, or whatever you have. So there's a lot of things. As you can see, I really did a bad job with this one. There's a lot of things here. It's all medium. I think you can filter on these things. There's a security policy like OpenHSS, SSH, which isn't being applied in a correct way. So you really can do a lot of wrong things here if you're just pushing this, like for instance, a container instance. Okay. So there's some highlighting here still on how to implement it and where it sits in your environment here, also how it works. And then as a last thing, I showed a couple of demonstrations with Azure DevOps. I'm going to show you two more things with GitHub too, and then we're done for the day. The one thing that I really want to highlight is GitHub is doing a lot of effort to making code scanning a breeze. And one of the things that we do today is we bought a company called Semel, and we implemented this as CodeQL. And this will actually, based upon the language that you will have all these code remediations that you need to fix, like which will highlight things like OWASP top 10 rules, but also like injections, hard-coded credentials and stuff like that. So you can actually fix your code from that part. Even on the dependency part, the little thing that I showed with white source, that's also now included into Azure, and you can actually see whether there is a high severity or low severity or a moderate severity on dependency issues available inside of your code. So this will also help you to fix your code in a better way. There's lots of more stuff in there. Setting up the code QL thing, for instance, is really easy. If you take a look, it will create an action, and that action is just a CodeQL workflow, and that workflow just gets onboarded very easily. You can set it up really, really fast. If you want to change it, you can even do more because you can run multiple ones. So, but this one comes by default in CodeQL, and just set up this workflow. It gives you a YAML file, and you're done with it. You have an actions file. All right. Having that said, I have a lot of resources still for you here. I'll leave these for your reading. There's some labs here where you can test drive of those things. There's even a list with something which I haven't discussed, DAS tools. Take a look at those. A lot of these things are for free. Try to use them. And on that bombshell, I have 3 more minutes left. Sherry, word is back to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Mike. Really good stuff. A lot of stuff to consume, but
Sorry.
But really, no, it's really good. Yeah, you warned us before, so amazing. Thanks for that. And we don't have questions in the chat right now, so it has been very clear, and maybe something will come up afterwards.
I have one quick question. It's been a while since I used SonarQube actually. I remember you actually couldn't provide much of a very good code health review for the JavaScript and for the front end part. Has it been improved? Because I remember you had to combine it with a lot of different things. Okay, that's Then I
There's a lot of improvement there. Yeah.
Great.
They even added a new part I think it was in the previous release, so like a couple of months ago. And there's just been a new release since last week, so yeah. I haven't updated it yet, so I was afraid to do it to break my demos, but yeah.
Great, thank you very much. You all can scan this QR code to get your Winter Learner badge. And I already put it in the chat as well. And if you want to know more about the program, you can go ahead and check it on Azure, aka.ms/azure.heroes. And yes, go on there and nominate yourself or your community friend. And
we want your feedback. So just very quick. Scan the QR code, give us feedback on Twitter, send us an email, shout out in chat, both in terms of how did it go with this session, anything you want more of, any new topics, anything we should ask Mike to deep dive into, anything. Go. Do you want to speak at DevShow yourself? Let us know.
And one of you will get a swag box from us as well.
Of course. Sherry Santa Claus is here.
Yes.
Nice.
And we have Cloud Secrets coming up on 27th and 8th with 2 of the MVPs that you might know.
I know those guys, yep.
so yes, you can still join the sessions. It's actually there are 3 4 hours deep dive in the topic. And the next week we have Jens coming back.
Yeah, if you were in one of the first episodes, we actually had Jens giving another session on Power Platform. So now he's taking a slightly different angle to it, talking about the backend services. So stay tuned for that and join us next Tuesday for the session with Jens.
And accessibility. So on February 3rd, we have this conference with my colleagues from France, together with the because we all know that it's a very important topic. And my favorite conference, Global Diversity Day. We discussed it before. It was supposed to happen actually this week, if I remember right, but there was some issues, so they postponed it to February 20. So if you have anyone around you that you believe that is going to need a little bit of a push to submit the very first CFP and it consider themselves as the kind of part of the diversity group. So yeah, underrepresented groups, please ask them to join this conference. And we have the hackathon coming up, all about the climate, and we are collaborating with some NGOs that they bring an actual challenge on table. And yeah, we want you all to be there and bring all your technical expertise, so we do actually something for the climate issue that we have right now. I hope to see you there, and I would say that's it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mike, for speaking and giving us insights into a lot of tools. And thanks everybody for watching. And see you next week.
Yeah, see you all next week.
Bye.